Animal suffering. This is a really strange idea. I mean, sorry. Look, animal suffering is not strange. It's a commonplace, right? It's not something that is like, whoa, animals suffer? I didn't know that. Sure, everyone has seen an animal suffer. I don't think that you have to be a philosopher to think that, right? So what follows from the existence of animal suffering? I'm not sure very much, really. Some philosophers on YouTube have thought that somehow the existence of animal suffering entails the absence of God. Now, I'm not quite sure what to make of that entailment relation. There is a fact of animal suffering. I think that as a Christian philosopher, I think you'd have to be hard-pressed to deny animal suffering. And now, look, when I talk about animal suffering, I mean non-human animals. Human beings are not merely animals, but we're certainly biologically animal. Not merely animals. We're made in the image of God. So whatever animal suffering is, it's going to be a suffering that's distinct from human suffering. So humans suffer as humans. Now, if you want to say, well, we participate in the category of animality, sure. But anything that suffers will have the aspect of suffering, but different kinds of things will suffer as the kind of thing that they are. And animals are fundamentally different kinds of things than human beings. And here's why. Primarily, animals lack rationality. They lack intelligence. They don't think about their thoughts. So let's just stipulate rationality to be, at least minimally, the ability to reflect upon your thoughts. You want to call it intuit or reflect, maybe, introspect, you want to put it that way. But I take this to be the ability to take a thought or an idea and think about it and reflect upon it and describe it, those features, and to think about it inside your own experience, inside your own mind, and ultimately to make some sense out of it if you're able to do that. Now, I don't think maybe some philosophers do this, but I don't, as a philosopher, think that animals lack, higher animals lack some kind of mental content or mental states. So take a pain state. I think that, say, a mammal, a dog or a cat, I don't think that cats are a result of the fall. Some philosophers, Christian philosophers, might think that. But take a dog who steps on a sharp rock, or say has another dog bite its tail or something, and yelps, and it's a yelp of pain or whines in pain. Now, I don't think it's beyond the pale to think that dog has a phenomenal what it's like to feel pain. So I take a pain state to be the identity conditions for a pain state to be just the phenomenal features of being in pain. That's what pain is. It's a phenomenal qualia that's had by a mind. So let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that animals have pain states. What I want to deny is that animals can take a pain state and take their mind and reflect upon that pain state. They don't think about their pain. They don't have or engage in what you might call second-order thoughts. They don't worry about their pain. They don't dread their pain. They don't write songs of lament about their pain. They don't. Now, look, there was a TV show called A Dog with a Blog, but I'm pretty sure that was fiction. Although some of you might think that show was an actual documentary. So, barring A Dog with a Blog, dogs don't engage in second order reflection on their pain states. So if you take pain to be a kind of suffering, and I suppose maybe not all pain is suffering, but certainly certain states of suffering may involve pain. But whether or not there are states of suffering that don't involve pain, let's leave that as an open question for now. Let's just focus on cases of states of suffering that do involve pain. So let's say, now again, what is suffering going to be? And we've described pain already, but let's just take suffering to be the lack of a proper telos of the parts or the whole of the being of an organism. So, for example, if a dog, and we don't have to pick on dogs here, pick your favorite mammal. Like maybe fish suffer, okay, worms suffer, crustaceans, I don't know. Let's just focus on easier cases. Because I think probably the cases that are used to attempt to justify the non-existence, it's really hard for me to do this without laughing, and I need to be more charitable, I suppose. I just don't see the problem of animal suffering entailing the absence of the existence of God, or the non-existence of God. But let's go back to thinking about animal suffering. So if an animal's suffering is if suffering as such is the failure of the part or the whole of an organism to achieve its teleological end, that necessarily, let's just for the sake of argument, includes a pain state that accompanies it, concomitant pain state, then let's just assume that animals can be in such states, or the state of affairs in which a part or the whole is teleologically deficient and involves a concomitant pain state, that animals can have those. Okay, so I think it's probably fair to say, yeah, that may be the case. But what animals don't have is the ability to think about their own suffering. They can't reflect on their suffering. So animals don't, whatever animal suffering turns out to be, it's a different kind of thing than human suffering. Because human suffering can involve our own thinking about our state of suffering and the pain that accompanies it. Now, whether human suffering entails the absence of the existence of God, that's a different question, and probably connects to the problem of evil generally. And probably this discussion of animal suffering is just a branch of the problem of evil in the absence of, the problem of evil in the philosophy of religion, more broadly speaking. So back to animal suffering. I suppose that one could say, well, animal suffering is of a sort that it's just so bad, and since animals can't reflect on their own conscious states, that state of affairs is so bad. In other words, they can't even make sense of their own suffering, and that's just really bad. And that badness somehow entails the absence of a good God, or is evidence against the sheer possible existence of a good and loving God. I'm still not seeing that either. I just don't. There must be, maybe there's a middle premise that I'm missing. If the natural world is created such that animals don't suffer in a perfect world, then the absence of that perfection might be explained by a theodicy, perhaps. On a Christian view, is animal suffering the result of the fall? I mean, that you could give a theodicy in that way. But I'm not sure animal suffering itself is intrinsically, gratuitously evil by itself, right? If did animals suffer on during the first 6 days of creation, or the first 5 days of creation? Let's just say you take the creation days just as they are written. Let's just assume that, right? That there were animals before there were human beings. Okay, just assume that. And and the animals were carnivores. And one animal ate another or attacked another and then ate it. I don't see the animal might suffer, but it doesn't think about its own suffering, and so it can't suffer from despair, right? It might suffer as a biological organism, but it doesn't suffer with respect to the kind of soul that leads to a worse form of suffering, which is like something like despair. So I don't see that as necessarily an evil or even a privation. If animals are created such that they are, say, carnivorous, and one animal eats another and causes pain and suffering in that sense to another, that is for the telos of the animal that's eating the other animal. In other words, animals don't seem to inflict gratuitous suffering on other animals. They just act animally. And I don't see that as as a form of evil or even as a privation within the animal kingdom, other than a biological privation. And biological privations for animals or plants might be bad in the sense, bad qua privation, but not bad qua morally bad, or even evilly bad. That is, if they are intended to be such, privative in the sense of the animal kingdom for consumption and fuel, biological fuel of those animals. So I just don't see that that connection of the putative suffering, animal suffering, entailing the absence of a good God, unless it's just under the broader problem of evil. Human suffering, I think, is a different kind of thing, a different question. But I think either way, I think both of these can be solved by the way in which I was trained on this by some of my teachers. I don't think I'll mention which one here. This is not a formal presentation that needs footnotes. But however, the existence of animal suffering, such as it is, even if I'm totally wrong about it in this video, and human suffering too, however you explain that should be explained in light of evidence that we have of things that are greater than the things that we're analyzing. So if we take suffering, human or animal or otherwise, as the object of study, and if I can explain the object of that study by means of an answer to a greater ontic reality than the object that I'm studying, then how I explain animal suffering can be explained better by the thing that explains the greater ontic being. That might have been too much too quick. Let me put it this way. Which is greater, the existence of suffering, animal or otherwise, or the existence of the cosmos? Well, I think the existence of the cosmos is a greater thing than animal suffering. There's a lot more to the cosmos than suffering. Now, look, you might ask a certain type of philosopher, maybe Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist expert, but everything is dukkha or suffering. But barring that, that might be a separate video, right? But barring that, we're aware of being, of ourselves and the cosmos, the whole of existence, prior to the being of suffering. In other words, we're only aware of suffering because it might be a privation of goodness of being, even in animals, even if it's not a moral issue or an evil issue. Not all privations are evil as such. It might be bad, qua lack of being, but that's different than moral evil. So we could get into that distinction maybe in another video. But look, we're aware of the existence of things, the existence of the cosmos and ourselves, before we're aware of suffering, and in animals also. So if I can make sense of the existence of the cosmos, and if in doing that, I discover that the cosmos exists because it depends for its existence on God, in other words, the existence of the cosmos points to the existence of God. If I can see that, if there's good reasons to think that, then in the analysis of the smaller thing, ontically and experientially, suffering, can be explained in light of what we know about God from the existence of the cosmos. So, to say that a lesser thing, suffering, can entail absence of evidence from something that a greater thing, namely the existence of the cosmos, already points to, the existence of God, an all-powerful personal being. And I take the general arguments for the existence of God to be persuasive, cosmological, teleological especially, moral maybe as well. But especially those first two, cosmological and teleological, those arguments are pretty good. There's really good evidence there. And those point to the existence of a God who designs things for a purpose. So whatever evidence we have for God there, apply that now to the problem of suffering. And you've got your answer. It might be hard to do. And it might not be easy to do. It might not be satisfactory for everybody, right? You may not be convinced by it. But that's the way to do it. That's the way to solve this alleged problem of animal suffering entailing the non-existence of God. I think it's if that's your reason for rejecting theism or Christianity, that's a really bad reason. Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching.